It was a big day when the new equipment arrived.
It's big. Biggest one I've ever seen.
Of course, being a custom job, some assembly was required.
It'll be a few weeks, people.
But finally, it was ready. One of the world's fastest check-writing systems. Some insurance companies look for ways to get your money from you faster.
I hear she'll do $12,000 an hour.
At Aetna, we look for ways to get your money to you faster.
An arrest in the shooting of two state troopers.
At 11.
Moon, moonstruck, moonglow, moonlight. A poet said, like a great phantom slowly sweeping through the sky, the moon comes closer to the earth than she should and makes men mad. During the height of the Cold War, we were driven mad to go to the moon by our rivalry with the Soviet Union. We had to get there first by any means possible, by hook or by crook, or in this case, by what was called a flying bedstead.
A month before we were due to land on the moon, the man who would first set foot on the lunar surface was practicing with this gadget. It was a model of the vehicle that would make the moon landing. His name was Neil Armstrong, and that's a lunar lander trainer. There's a primitive 1969 computer inside, and it's supposed to be flying the lander, not Armstrong. It's dangerous, it's difficult to control. The whole contraption isn't working well. As a matter of fact, it's going to crash. Neil Armstrong has crashed before. He has a reputation for staying with the ship until the very last moment. 1 month later, an emergency like this will happen when he'll be a few thousand feet over the moon. On Earth, he can do something he won't be able to do on the moon. He hits the abort button.
Got one.
The parachute is close to the fire. Neil Armstrong almost didn't get to the moon. The sky above is measured nightly from the Naval Observatory in Washington. For centuries, the only way to get to the moon was by telescope. We traveled by eyes alone. There was no risk. Then, in the 60s, it was apparent that the rockets carrying nuclear warheads had become so powerful that either we or the Russians would get to the moon. President John Kennedy ordered the United States to send a man to the moon and bring him back safely before the end of that decade. We got there at considerable risk and at great cost. We went to the bright side of the moon in the dark years of the Cold War. And yet, to my mind at least, nothing in this century has excited us more, united us more, than the moon landing. It was not only an American triumph, but the greatest adventure of the 20th century. The story of Apollo 11's voyage to the moon and its three-man crew is one of great risk, risks far greater than were acknowledged then. Tonight, we document that voyage, we look at our country, and we relive the triumph of going to the moon.
IBM is pleased to help sponsor this special salute to the Apollo 11 mission and the people who made it possible. Tonight, we'll also show you a few of the ways IBM solutions are making a difference.
Well, space is there, and the moon and the planets are there, and new hopes for knowledge and peace are there. And therefore, as we set sail, we ask God's blessing on the most hazardous and dangerous and greatest adventure on which man has ever embarked.
We sent them into the unknown,
And they took with them not only America's hopes and dreams, but new, unheard-of technologies that have since touched us all.
The master computer supervises hundreds of events at astronauts report it feels good. 12, 11, 10, 9, ignition.
And the whole world watched. And the whole world shared our pride. From the earliest unmanned missions, IBM technology has played an important part in America's space program. We are honored to have shared in this remarkable journey.
July 15th, 1969, Cape Canaveral, the night before the great day. Tawdry and teeming and alive, the Cape was a magnet that night for Americans from all over the country. 3 men were about to go to the moon in a rocket. 3 men atop a 6 million-pound firecracker. A Roman candle for a Roman circus.
The forecast, plenty of sunshine through today with seasonal temperatures. We should reach our normal high of about 82.
Hundreds of reporters were there, of course, from all over the world. But I wasn't one of them. About 40 CBS News camera crews and I paid no professional attention to the moon launch. We were fanning out across the country to take some snapshots, to make a record on the day men were to first land on the moon of the country they had come from, to record a day in the life of the United States. Those notes for history have waited in our archives for 20 years. Tonight, we open that time capsule. We discover that what we recorded were mostly private things. The sound of our voices, the look of our faces, the ordinary way we were back home on Earth on the day 3 of our own were doing extraordinary things in the sky. Back in time, out to space, back to a time when America did things differently.
Morning, July 16th, 1969. Breakfast for the men who were going to the moon. On the left, Mike Collins, astronaut. Brother, nephew, and son of 3 Army generals. He will fly the command module, circle the moon alone many times, while Armstrong and Aldrin land on it. Buzz Aldrin, the most accomplished scientist of the group. Neil Armstrong, former test pilot, commander of the mission. If they got there, they'd be heroes. If they failed, they'd be martyrs.
Right now, our count at 3 hours, 3 minutes and counting, aiming toward the planned liftoff time of 9:32 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time. This is launch control.
They knew they were caught in the whirl of history. What they could not know was that their characters would be reshaped by the flight they were about to take. Indeed, a year later, all 3 men had left the space program. NASA had chosen these 3 men for reasons spoken and unspoken. They were all test pilots. All had faced danger many times, and the Apollo program was dangerous. It might even be deadly. NASA was going to leave the microphones open all through the flight. If they died, they'd die in public. That was the unspoken part. What was better known was that there were 6 crews ready. This crew was matched to Apollo 11, and Apollo 11 was the vehicle first ready to fly to the moon. That's how they got the assignment. Not quite by chance, but it could have been 15 other men.
T-minus 3 hours, 4 minutes, 32 seconds and counting. Right on time as far as the astronaut countdown is concerned. The prime crew now departing from their crew quarters here at the Kennedy Space Center. Astronauts Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and then finally Mike Collins, plus their suit technicians and Director of Flight Crew Operations, Deke Slayton, now boarding the transfer van for the trip to the launch pad.
Later, the three astronauts would write that success was the priority, not safety. Safety had been sacrificed to the goal of beating the Soviets to the moon. NASA had four priorities. The fourth was satisfying man's curiosity about the mystery of the moon. The third was obtaining scientific evidence about the lunar surface. The defense of the United States was the second urgency. But America's prestige in the world was the reason for Apollo 11. Who was first in space was first in the world, two presidents had said.
In a matter of 5 minutes or so, we'll be ready for the spacecraft commander, Neil Armstrong, to come across the sill at the 320-foot level. That is our status at 2 hours, 43 minutes, 47 seconds, and counting. This is launch control.
The money for space had been hidden in the military budget for years. The cost of the Apollo program alone was $25 billion and 3 dead astronauts in Apollo 1's first practice mission. They had died in a spacecraft just like the one these astronauts are entering.
Here from CBS News Apollo headquarters at Kennedy Space Center, correspondent Walter Cronkite.
Good morning. It's T-minus 1 hour, 29 minutes, and 53 seconds, and counting in just an hour and a half. If all goes well, Apollo 11 astronauts, Armstrong, Aldrin, and Collins, are to lift off from pad 39A out there on the voyage man always has dreamed about. Next stop for them, the moon.
For almost 10 years, the space program had been driving toward this moment. Somehow just seeing this on television wasn't enough. Seats were allocated on a ranking that started with the initials IIP, incredibly important people. The former President of the United States and his wife. The present Vice President of the United States, Spiro Agnew. Then came VIPs, very important people. Last of all, those who stood outside the glass of fame or celebrity. They were known as RAMs, raggedy-assed masses. NASA announced that more than 1 million people were in eyeshot of the launch.
This is Apollo Saturn launch control. We're now less than 16 minutes away from the planned liftoff of the Apollo 11 space vehicle. All still going well with the countdown at this time. The vehicle starting to pressurize as far as the propellant tanks are concerned, and all is still go as we monitor.
There was a kind of mad genius to Apollo 11. Since we couldn't get to the moon with a single rocket, this was a collection of rockets. The idea was that each stage would be thrown away as it was used, that the spacecraft would eat itself, so to speak. 5 powerful thrusting rockets were strapped together to get the vehicle off the ground. On the pad, the spacecraft weighed 6 million pounds. When and if the astronauts came back, 99.5% of the original weight would be gone, thrown away in the heavens or thrown back to Earth. A vehicle 36 stories tall would end up as a 10-foot capsule. This is the only section that would make the complete trip.
We're approaching the 60-second mark on the Apollo 11 mission. T-minus 60 seconds and counting. We passed T-minus 60.
Apollo 11 was under hundreds of lenses. Not only those of television, but the cameras of NASA, which would record every stage of the rocket's performance.
Power transfer is complete. We're on internal power with the launch vehicle at this time. 40 seconds away from the Apollo 11 liftoff. All the second stage tanks now pressurized. 35 seconds and counting. We are still go with Apollo 11. 30 seconds and counting. Astronauts report it feels good. T-minus 25 seconds. 20 seconds and counting. T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal. 12, 11, 10, 9. Ignition sequence starts. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running.
after enough thrust has been generated, the restraining arms fall back. Ice falling from the supercooled liquid oxygen tanks. The most dangerous seconds of every launch are the first 12. That's the time needed to clear the tower. July 16th, 1969. 3 Americans left for the moon.
Tower cleared.
We got a roll program. Building shaking. Getting that buffeting we've become used to. What a moment. Man on the way to the moon.
On that day, what tied us together was fear and hope. How small the capsule. How brave those 3 men.
Glasses on, please. Okay, kids. Today we're going to demonstrate a discovery that could change your lives. Oh, really?
Fortune magazine called it a remarkable breakthrough. Time said it could change the world. They were talking about the Nobel Prize-winning discovery by 2 IBM scientists of a substance that carries electricity with no resistance and makes magnetic objects defy gravity. It could also lead to advances in many fields, such as transportation, medicine, and computers. It's a new kind of superconductor, one that works at more practical temperatures than ever before. This IBM achievement has sparked a new era of research and is fascinating not only scientists, but future scientists. Advances in superconductivity, another example of IBM technology at work.
The nutrition of Kellogg's Mini Wheats gives moms and dads a great start.
But the kids and us think the frosting is the really neato part.
Reports that Mini Wheats nutrition is a hit with heads of households. But one taste of the frosting, and they're happy 10-year-olds. Back to you, Bob.
Kellogg's Frosted Mini Wheats. Shredded wheat nutrition for the adult in you. Delicious light frosting for the kid who's still in you.
Speaking as a kid, the delicious light frosting is my favorite side to eat. But the shredded wheat nutrition is really tough to beat.
They call me up. Hey, good news. You can save 35% off AT&T. So I switch. Call my sister. Takes longer getting through, but I'm saving, right? Then the bill comes. 35% off. They forget to mention it's only on these quick little calls over 900 and something miles away. So I call them up. Hey, bad news. I'm going back to AT&T.
People who thought they could do better than AT&T are coming back for the real value. Aren't you glad you never left?
Make a break for the Pat Sajak Show tonight.
They were going to the moon in stages. At 6,000 miles an hour, the empty first stage is discarded to save weight. So is a ring which tied the first stage to the rocket. The escape tower isn't needed, it's discarded. The second stage boosts the speed to 15,000 miles an hour, and then it too is jettisoned.
8 miles downrange, 12 miles high. Velocity 4,000 feet per second.
When we last saw the astronauts, they were preparing to discard the second stage of their spacecraft. 35 miles into the flight of Apollo 11, a camera looking backwards from the rocket switched on, and the second stage of the vehicle fell away.
Inboard cutoff. Inboard engines out.
I'm inboard cutoff.
Downrange 35 miles, 30 miles high. Standing by for the outboard engine cut down now.
Staging. And ignition.
The ring that tied them together also separates.
11 Houston, thrust is go. All engines, you're looking good. Hi, Roger. You're loud and clear, Houston.
At 3 minutes, downrange 70 miles, 43 miles high, velocity 9,300 feet per second.
The sky was still above, the earth was still below.
Tower's gone. Roger, tower.
Neil Armstrong confirming both the engine skirt separation and the launch escape tower separation.
Houston, be advised the visual is go today. This is Houston. Roger, out. Yeah, they finally gave me a window to look out. 11 Houston, your guidance has converged. You're looking good.
Downrange 140 miles, altitude 62 miles, velocity 10,300 feet per second.
America on a hot summer Sunday in July. In Las Vegas, the gamblers were giving 6 to 5 on a successful moon landing and 5 to 3 on a successful return.
Booster says it's looking good at 5 minutes.
As the moment of the moon landing approached, as the lives of 3 Americans were in balance in the sky, at exactly that same time, these fragments of conversations were being spoken on the earth. If you listen closely, you'll hear some of the short stories that make up the American novel of our lives.
Hey, we talk languages here. Hey, todo barato. Bueno barato. Hey, Tatsuki the mamas, we got it there for you. Hey, help me keep my wife in the country.
Jim, this is a mint julep. You ought to have one of them.
This
Want one?
is a Tom Collins. It's better.
We'll be placing you on 32 days special leave. When this leave terminates, you'll be reporting to Fort Dix, New Jersey for onward transportation back to Vietnam.
Downrange 270 miles, altitude 82 miles, velocity 12,472 feet per second.
Flight S4B to COI capability. Okay.
Richard and Terry, I'm sure that both of you are aware that marriage is the oldest rite and the oldest ceremony of mankind.
Taking all the money that I ain't made. We'll rock out loud. We'll rock out loud. We'll rock out loud. Everybody go roll. If you want to ride, you gotta ride it like a funny. Get your ticket out and leave it out. Rock out loud. Hold out now.
Money isn't, money as far as the yearly income doesn't make a bit of difference as far as happiness is
The
concerned.
heck it doesn't. You've got to have enough to live on, to pay your bills, and send your children to school, Bill.
Sometimes I've been charged with being an elitist. Well, of course I am. What do people expect? God forbid that we should be without an elite. Is everything to be done by gray mediocrity?
I loathe people who cannot reconcile themselves with this country because it isn't perfect. Who the hell are they to expect America to be perfect? America was built by the scum of the earth there, and we created a tremendous country here. How can you expect this thing to be perfect? You got to get down on your knees and praise the Lord that the scum accomplished so much.
What is your nationality?
My nationality is Afro-American.
What is freedom?
Freedom is black power.
What is black power?
Black power is...
Do you know what black power is?
No.
Well, then you should never should never make any statements if you don't know what they mean.
I'm sorry, I don't know.
Everyone's reporting go here in the control center.
So in 6 minutes, starting to give them orders.
Roger 11, your go from the ground at 6 minutes.
Columbia Presbyterian Hospital on the west side of New York City. What was about to happen on the moon wasn't the only life and death drama of the day. A little girl is brought in by the police. She has a very high fever. She's frightened. And her mother is frightened. It looks like a simple viral infection.
Miss, on Georgia Carter, I forgot to tell you that she has Medicare and Medicaid.
Nurse Toby Mache goes back to her desk. Then the simple case becomes complicated.
I turned around, and I'm going for the room. I'm going quickly. I've gotten into the room. The little girl is having a seizure.
Shut down right on time.
1.4 by 103.6. Roger, shut down, and we copy 101.4 by 103.
She isn't stopping the seizure. And we've given her 5 milligrams of Valium. So we probably will give her more.
Now they're coming into a tight corner.
Why somebody help hold it? Okay, I get it.
4-year-old Ana Arias is convulsing. The strong drugs they're giving her to stop the convulsions can also stop breathing and heartbeat.
If a convulsion continues for a long time, then brain damage may occur.
A surgeon is in the room now. A neurologist has been called for. The medical forces of the hospital are mobilizing.
What's her name? Anna. Anna? And then her last name is Anna.
Anna.
The convulsions haven't stopped. Working fast, they move Ana Arias into the cardiac arrest room.
Copying you about 5 by 2, very weak. Can you give us a status report, please?
She's had an awful lot of medicine, and we're giving her more. She's still seizing. We're trying, all the hands are one person trying to do a cut down, to get into her, one person trying to hold her. I'm reaching across trying to suction her and to hold her at the same time. Another person's reached across to hold her so that I can just help with the IV. Everyone is trying all at once to do something.
You made it too tight. It's not that tight. This part is.
There are 12 hands on Ana Arias's body. 12 hands dependent on one another, dependent on complicated skills, complicated machines. Any of us, healthy and alive on July 20th, 1969, would have liked it this way if we had become ill. There are 12 hands on Ana Arias's body. At a given moment, the hands know. The convulsions have stopped.
Apollo 11, this is Houston. You are confirmed to go for orbit.
Crying is the best sound in the world to hear when you have heard nothing from a child before that. Yes. Anna is past crisis now.
Two hours into the mission, the spacecraft accelerates towards orbit.
Altitude is 100 miles, downrange 883 miles. Outboard engine cutoff.
And ignition. Ignition confirmed. Thrusters go, 11.
This view is inside the exhausted part of the rocket. Apollo 11 is traveling faster than 6,300 miles an hour. Now, you and the vehicle containing this camera will slowly fall into the North Atlantic.
Apollo 11, this is Houston. You are confirmed to go for orbit. 1.4 by 103.6.
You've suffered through all kinds of diets and regimens, but if you don't get enough protein when you're dieting to lose fat, you might lose muscle. Protein can help you keep muscle while you lose fat, and Special K has the highest level of dietary protein available in a cereal. So one reason for including the under 200 calorie Special K breakfast in a balanced diet is rather obvious. Special K. Keep the muscle, lose the fat.
Hello. Now that summer's here, many of you will be seeking relief at your local watering hole. But for those individuals who prefer to stay cool and dry, Ed has come up with something new and exciting. Bartles & James Premium Blush, with a refreshing taste that is drier than any other cooler we know of. If you're looking for a way to cool off this summer, we hope you'll try new Premium Blush. As Ed says, it is the perfect cooler for those who like their cooler drier. And thanks for your support.
Apollo is going at 17,400 miles an hour in orbit around the Earth. It circles the Earth almost twice, and then the third stage fires again. Apollo 11 is now free of Earth's gravity. There are 3 remaining parts to the spacecraft. The astronauts are in the very front of what's called the command module. The LEM, the vehicle that would put them on the moon, is in the next section. The third part is just holding the LEM. What they must do is turn the command module around and gain access to the LEM. The blueprint looked simple. In space, it was another matter. Both vehicles are moving at 17,400 miles an hour, but that's if you're measuring from Earth. In space, they're closing cautiously at a couple of feet per second. The target is that black circle in the center. The first part of the move was by computer, but the computer had made an error of 34 feet, and control of the spacecraft was taken over by Mike Collins. At the end of the link-up, they're moving at fractions of an inch per second. The probe touches the lander. The metal locks click together. Docking complete. For 3 days, they coast towards the moon. As the moon's gravity reaches out, they accelerate.
11, Houston, we have a beautiful rainbow there, and as you move the camera around, that looks like the star chart coming into view now, over.
Like the first voyagers who went to the seas, the first voyagers who went to the moon relied on the stars in heaven to get them there. That's a chart of the stars they'd see on their voyage, illuminated from the rear by the sunlight coming through their cabin. A few hours after launch, America saw a relaxed face of an astronaut.
That's Big Mike Collins there. Well, you got a little bit of... Yeah, hello there, sports fans. You got a little bit of me, plus Neil's in the center couch, and Buzz is doing the camera work this time.
The camera makes the cabin seem larger than it is. Each of these men has less space than a passenger in the average automobile. And their ride was 500,000 miles long. These cramped quarters would serve as a TV studio, a music booth, a kitchen, a bedroom, a bathroom, a gym, and a clubhouse. Now, for almost 3 days, except for small engineering tasks, it would be a lazy ride to the moon in zero gravity. When there is no gravity, things float rather than fall.
Zero G is very comfortable, but after a while you get to the point where you sort of get tired of rattling around and banging off the ceiling and the floor and the side, so You tend to find a little corner somewhere and put your knees up or something like that to wedge yourself in, and that seems more at home.
That's a piece of white bread rising. Buzz Aldrin is making a sandwich with ham spread. As the can drifts away, Mike Collins just pushes it back.
We've discovered that it is quite easy to...
These simple human touches were necessary because most things surrounding this voyage were so technical as to be incomprehensible to ordinary people.
Houston, this next is a little demonstration for the kids at home, all kids everywhere for that matter.
In space, water doesn't drip or spill. It becomes a ball held down by a spoon. Mike Collins played with water as if it were a toy.
Oh, Apollo 11, Houston, you can terminate TV at your convenience. We've got enough tape.
That's Neil Armstrong, upside down, sleeping. Of the three astronauts, he slept least and spoke least. There's no record of his dreams.
Roger, Charlie.
There's no record of America's dreams that night either. We were a troubled country because we were at war, what seemed to be an endless war.
Travis Air Force Base, San Francisco.
Look at it. Oh, man. What?
In July 1969, the machine of history was not Apollo 11, but the Vietnam War. They had left Da Nang and Yokota a day earlier, and when they arrived, they were part of 250,000 wounded who had returned from Southeast Asia. Even before July 1969, Vietnam had become the longest war in American history. The best we could do was a kind of institutionalized compassion. They were handled with gentleness, but on a production line. It would take 6 more years for the war to end.
Gentlemen, give me your attention for a couple of minutes, please. I believe we can answer some questions for all of you. These remarks are primarily directed toward those of you returning from a live fire area in casualty status. Comments pertain to all services, gentlemen. Now, when you left the live fire area, most of you left all or at least a part of your personal gear behind. Please bear in mind, gentlemen, the only way old Uncle Sam can repay you for your personal property which has been lost is for you to submit a claim to the government for reimbursement. Are there any questions on this, gentlemen? Now, of course, the $64 question to everybody is, what's the score on convalescent leave? This is a free ride, not chargeable to you in any way. So as soon as you can convince the doctors and the nurses at the station you're going to that you're healthy, you're full of fun and games, you can take care of yourself, you have no problems, you'll be no problem to your dependents, you have to actually convince this doctor that you can stand the wear and tear of 30 days on the economy. Any questions on convalescent leave? The tax exemption that you all enjoyed in the live fire area, gentlemen, will continue for so long as you remain in the hospital. So when you start to make out these stateside income taxes, be mighty certain that you take full advantage of all the exemptions you're entitled to. Exemptions are mighty hard to come by in the States, gentlemen, so use what you brought with you. Now, are there any questions, gentlemen, on anything we've covered?
Most car accidents happen in a showroom. People buy the wrong car. They want a car as quick as a Saab, as roomy as a Saab, as safe as a Saab, as reasonably priced as a Saab. But they don't test drive a Saab. Don't buy the wrong car. Visit your Saab dealer for a test drive. It's fun, it's free, and there's no risk involved.
Right now, you can lease a fully equipped Saab 900 for only $235 a month.
I swear, I heard them. They said 35% off AT&T. Well, it took a little longer to get through, but I kept thinking of that first low bill. Can I get the first bill? 35% off? Well, you gotta read the fine print. You gotta make these really short calls over 900-something miles away after 7 p.m. You gotta follow their rules. I don't like rules.
People who thought they could do better than AT&T are coming back for the real value. Aren't you glad you never left?
The Moon Above, the Earth Below will continue.
You know, after 10 years of anchoring the news in New York, I suddenly feel like the new kid on the block. Let's face it, switching channels is sort of like starting all over again. I'm going to be working with a new team, talking to new viewers, and facing some new challenges. Fortunately, there are two things that'll never change. Your right to know the truth, and my responsibility to report it.
Ernie Anastas joins the first team weeknights at 5, 6, and 11 on Channel 2 News.
I'm Dan Rather, CBS News. In December 1776, this future president found himself at the head of a despairing ragtag army that seemed destined for defeat at the hands of the British. Then, on Christmas night, he crossed the ice-filled Delaware River to Trenton, New Jersey, where British mercenaries were encamped. The next morning, he attacked. The enemy, who had partied all night, was taken by surprise. The stunning victory was a turning point in the war that won this nation its independence. The commanding general later became the nation's first president, George Washington.
Do you know what I love? I love that we don't have to settle for what life gives us. I love being a blonde. One of the nice things about Ultress is it has double conditioner. Makes your hair softer. If you haven't tried it, how do you know what you're missing?
This is CBS.
Fortunately, this happens in less than 1% of all accidents. Even so, Mercedes-Benz builds defenses against it into 100% of its cars.
See the classic Meadowlands Pace Friday night and take home a free pair of sunglasses. Plus, at midnight, a Kool and the Gang concert in Paddock Park. Friday night at the Meadowlands.
Don't miss the show with bigger prizes and bigger money at the Copa de Dana.
Don't you just love it?
On Wheel of Fortune, weeknights at 7:30.
This portion of The Moon Above, the Earth Below is sponsored by IBM. Whatever your size, whatever your needs, IBM is working to bring you the best solutions. And by Kellogg's Common Sense Oat Bran, a sensible thing to do. And by Gallo White Grenache, it will change the way you think about Gallo.
It doesn't look like a flying machine. Mike Collins said it looked like a praying mantis. All the rules for flying on Earth went out the window because on the moon, there's no air, no need for streamlining. This is a model of a limb. It took 8 years to build and cost $4 billion of today's dollars. The orange-colored mylar shows how dangerous the mission was because that plastic is insulation. When they landed on the moon, the astronauts were just some 5 feet above that engine. It was spewing gases at 5,000 degrees centigrade. But the biggest problem was weight. The vehicle had to be strong but light. Technicians were rewarded with bonuses of up to $25,000 for every pound they could take off of it. The walls were just thick enough to hold the molecules of air the astronauts breathed, as thin as heavy aluminum foil.
This gold helmet has become the symbol for the moon mission. The gold wash was to protect the eyes of the astronauts. Unless their faces were shielded from the rays of the sun up there, they ran the risk of going blind. Everybody's seen these space suits. The ones that went to the moon were about as special as anything ever tailored. They had 500 parts to them. They weighed 183 pounds. There were 4 layers to each of them, and they had 2 missions. One was to be a life support system, to surround the astronauts with the oxygen of Mother Earth. These were also suits of armor. In space, you're always in danger of being struck by tiny objects, small meteorites. They might be extremely small, but on the moon's surface, they'd be coming in at 64,000 miles an hour. You might think that the people who made the helmet and the moon suit would have to be great specialized technicians. The fact is, ordinary Americans made them.
I made boxing gloves before I came here, and the fact is I was an experienced sewer, but I had to learn all over again because it was completely different from what I had sewed before. This was getting right down to a 64th of an inch, and where I had sewed before, you just sewed on a production line. And this here is quality more than quantity.
Well, when they're up there in space, you know what parts you've worked on, and you just say, well, I hope that part don't fail because I'd feel it was my fault if it did.
My sentiments is what Hazel said. Well, I was just wondering if my pair of gloves was what he had on.
So if you make a mistake, if you don't admit it, you have to think about the astronaut too. If you make like a needle hole in the bladder or something like that, well, if you don't admit that, that would be on your conscience all the time, seems to me. Because I remember Armstrong and all them used to come in, and they would look around and see what we were doing. And once in a while they'd talk to us and sign their we'd get them to sign their autograph. Some of them were real comical. We got a kick out of them. We all wanted to talk to them, I guess. I remember one of them going down the aisle, everybody looked at him, afraid to talk. I said, hi, buddy.
Oh, I'd love to go into space. I think it would be really thrilling just to get in there and just blast off.
I'd love to go to space and just live there.
Every day you get up, you come to work, you go home, you clean house. If we go out there, there's no house, no kids, no problems.
I like to ride in an airplane, and I think I'd like to go into space. And I'd like to wear our own suit that we make. I think I could depend on it.
After each wearing, the technician tailors need 4 days to take the suits apart in a sterile room and put them back together.
This is Apollo Control at 100 hours, 14 minutes. We're now less than 2 minutes from reacquiring the spacecraft on the 13th revolution. When next we hear from them, the lunar module should be undocked from the command and service module. Flight Director Gene Kranz is going around the control center now, talking to his flight controllers, reviewing status, and in preparation for making the go, no-go decision.
Apollo 11, Houston, we are go for undocking, over. Roger, understand.
They're 40 miles above the moon. To keep from falling into the moon, they fire a rocket and enter lunar orbit. They circle 12 times while all systems are checked out. By this time, Armstrong and Aldrin have entered the lunar lander. On the 13th orbit, the lunar lander, Eagle, separates from the command module, Columbia, which circles the moon.
Hello, Eagle, Houston, we're standing by, over.
Roger, Eagle, undocked.
Roger, how does it look?
The Eagle has wings.
Roger.
The lunar lander leaves the command module. 2 men, Armstrong and Aldrin, leave Collins behind. This shot is taken from Collins' window. Now began a space ballet. That's Columbia, the mothership. Mike Collins is in it alone.
I think you got a fine-looking flying machine there, Eagle, despite the fact you're upside down.
Somebody's upside down.
In this duet, the LEM is presenting itself for Columbia's inspection. On the upper right of your picture, you see a ladder on the leg. It's from there they'll step onto the moon. The legs end in pods because nobody knows how soft the surface of the moon is, and the pods will keep the lander from sinking too far. The bottom part of the LEM is illuminated by the sun. It's that part which will remain on the moon. Now, as it turns, on the right, the darker part catches the sun. That's the section they'll ride back if all goes well.
There you go, 1 minute till take. You guys take care.
Hey,
Going right down US 1, Mike. See you later.
Aldrin and Armstrong have just said goodbye to Collins. Looking down on these craters is deceptive. These shots are from high up, and so it is difficult to realize that the sides of some of them are twice the height of the walls of the Grand Canyon. They're not yet at the point of no return.
This is Apollo Control. We have less than 10 minutes now until loss of signal on the 13th revolution. During this revolution, we will be giving the crew on the lunar module a go, no-go for the descent orbit insertion maneuver.
They're upside down, falling towards the moon. The moon is below. It is alien, strange, forbidding. It looks lifeless, but we had come so far to see if there had ever been life here. All the evidence was that this was a dead satellite of the living Earth, but until we landed on the moon and looked for clues, we could not know for certain that it had never supported life. The moon always keeps the same side towards us, and that side is relatively flat. It's thought that when the Earth and moon were both more liquid, the pull of Earth's gravity may have caused tides that flattened the moon's surface. For a reason nobody knows, the far side of the moon is all hilly and mountainous. Until this century, nobody had ever seen the other side of the moon. That's where Eagle is going. That's where the decision will be made, to land or not to land. They'll make it out of radio contact.
Apollo 11, this is Houston. All your systems are looking good going around the corner. We'll see you on the other side. Over.
Roger. Everything looks okay up here.
Roger out.
On the far side of the moon, where no human eye could see them and no human ear could hear them, Armstrong and Aldrin would decide whether they could land on the lunar surface that Sunday in 1969.
And as the moon sinks slowly in the west, Apollo 11 bids good day to you.
Roger out.
And we've had loss of signal as Apollo 11 goes behind the moon.
Hey. Listen, if I give you all some wine, do you promise to get out of the kitchen?
Depends on the wine.
I guarantee you like it. Just try it.
Ooh, this is nice.
Have we had this before?
No, I found something different.
White Grenache. Hey, Gallo. When did they start making this?
Y'all happy? Yeah? Good? All right, so out.
Ernest and Julio Gallo invite you to try a remarkable wine, White Grenache. It will change the way you think about Gallo.
240.
211.
You?
175.
Whoa!
A few years ago, hardly anyone knew their cholesterol level.
215.
But now people are finding out.
182.
Many have started eating a low-fat, low-cholesterol diet, including foods like Kellogg's Common Sense Oat Bran, with more oat bran than any leading ready-to-eat cereal.
219. I gotta start living right.
Kellogg's Common Sense Oat Bran. To more and more people, it's the oat bran that makes sense.
Meet Pamela, who's been hearing impaired since birth. Today, her world is changing with the aid of an IBM computer.
Ooh, ee, ah. Ooh, ee, ah.
These may look like games to you, but they're actually part of an innovative system developed by IBM researchers to help people with hearing and speech impairments develop their vocal skills.
Motor deco. That is a bear.
This system, called Speech Viewer, is one more example of how the people at IBM put technology to work, not only in business, but in life.
My name is Pamela.
This is what Mike Collins saw going around the moon just before Armstrong and Aldrin landed. That's an Earthrise. That's us back there behind the lunar horizon. That's the world we live in. The moon is lit with Earthlight, that blue line stretching across the great plains of the moon.
Space was the frontier of this century. But the century before, the frontier had been the West. The old frontier had never disappeared completely. Cattle drives, open ranges, some of the remnants of that past were still there in 1969. Outside Bernie, Montana, population 14, a natural force was to be tamed. The horse is a 3-year-old mare, Mona. The man is Bill McKinney. The horse is only halter broken. McKinney's job is to break her to a saddle and ride her.
Columbia, Houston, on those P-76s, friendly reminder from your FIDO, add half the burn time to the TIG, over.
Here. Oh, Mare. Oh, Mona. Oh, Mona.
He talks to her not particularly out of affection, but just to let her know where he is.
Oh, Mona.
What he must do is tie down the left rear leg, at least at the beginning. Otherwise, she'll hurt herself and him.
Oh, Mona. Oh, Mona.
It's not always done as gently as this. Some cowboys break horses with lead pipes. Mona is being trained as a saddle horse, but McKinney trains quarter horses, hunters, and jumpers all the same way.
Oh, Mare. Oh, Mona. Oh, Mona. Oh, Mona.
The moment the rope attached to the tire is pulled, the mare will feel a pressure she has never known before.
Oh. 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 Yeah. Yeah.
About an hour after he began, McKinney had a saddle and bridle on Mona. Now he was about to try to ride her.
Here.
Gene Kranz just advised his flight controllers we're off to a good start. Play it cool.
Here. Here. Come on. Come on. Here. Come on, turn around.
All right, copy. Looks great.
Come on. There you go.
On that weekend in July, a man in Montana rode a horse that had never been ridden before.
This is Apollo Control at 102 hours, 12 minutes into the flight of Apollo 11. We're now 21 minutes, 23 seconds from the beginning of the powered descent to the lunar surface. It's grown quite quiet here in Mission Control. A few moments ago, Flight Director Gene Kranz requested that everyone sit down, get prepared for events that are coming, and he closed with the remark, "Good luck to all of you."
At this time, Mission Control is not in control. The decision to land is with Armstrong and Aldrin, and they're on the far side of the moon.
We are now coming up on 30 seconds to acquisition of the command module.
Mike Collins reports in.
And we'll stand by for that event.
Columbia, Houston, over.
Houston, Columbia, reading you loud and clear. How many?
Watch 5 by Mike. How did it go, over? Listen, Dave, everything's going just swimmingly. Beautiful. Great. We're standing by for Eagle. Okay, he's coming along. We copy out.
Armstrong has brought it here 12 miles over the moon. Unless Mission Control calls for an abort, he's flying to the moon.
Good Eagle, how do you read? Bye-bye, Eagle. We're standing by for your burn report, over. Guidance says we're go.
In the sequence to come, there's some things to listen for. In particular, two code numbers, 1201 and 1202. Those are alarms. They are serious alarms. 1201 or 1202 means the computers can't handle the information they're receiving and that human beings have to intervene or there'll be a crash. The moon speeds by. They've just told Mission Control they were ready to land.
Coming up on 5 minutes to ignition. Gene Kranz getting a go, no-go for descent.
Okay, all flight controllers, go, no go for landing. Retro. Go. Fido. Go. Guidance. Go. Control. Go. Telcom. Go. GNC. Go. Ecom. Go. Surgeon. Go. Capcom, we're go for landing.
Eagle, this is Columbia. You're go for PDI, and they recommend you yaw right 10 degrees and try to high gain again. Eagle, Houston, we rig you now. You're go for PDI, over. Roger, understand. Lights on. One, zero. Ignition 10%.
You can't see the moon very well, and neither could they. Under their feet was a landing radar that gave them a picture of where they were heading.
Looking good. We show altitude about 47,000 feet.
The landing site had been photographed many times.
Good radar data. Altitude now 33,500 feet.
They thought they were going into a clear area, but they were in for a nasty surprise.
Eagle looking great. Your go. Roger, understand. Go for landing. 3,000 feet. You're looking great.
3,000 feet. Everything is still smooth.
We look good here, fine. How about you, Telcom? Go. Guidance, you happy? Go. Fido. Go.
2,000 feet. 2,000 feet. Into the ag. 47 degrees. Roger.
Just below 2,000, things go wrong.
Still looking
You'll
very
hear them
good.
say, program alarm, 1201.
Program alarm. 1201. 1201. Roger, 1201 alarm.
1201 alarm. Same type, we're go, flight. Okay, we're go.
We're go. Same type. We're go.
Armstrong just jumped in and said, we're go, hang tight. Nobody was going to stop him. According to the rule book, he should have been stopped. But Houston wasn't going to do it. He was Commander Armstrong, and that was his ship. So they gave him control of his destiny, and his heart rate went to 160 beats a minute.
1,400 feet, still looking very good.
Now a second alarm, a 1202.
Roger, 1202. We copy it.
The computer can't handle it. It's overloaded. Armstrong took control of the ship away from the computer. He's steering the limb manually.
21 down. 33 degrees. 100 feet down at 19. 540 feet down at 30 and at 15.
At this point, they couldn't see what was directly below them. It was like landing an airplane from a passenger seat.
They're 400 feet down at 9.
They're down to 9 miles an hour.
Forward. 10 and 50 feet down at 4. 30 and a half down. They're pegged on horizontal velocity. 300 feet down, 3.5. 47 forward. Put up. On 1.5 down.
The people watching television were looking at simulations, not the real films you're seeing. World audience was estimated at 500 million.
That's a shadow out there.
Final approach. Armstrong sees that he cannot land at the site selected by NASA and the computers.
5%.
What was supposed to be a clear field is strewn with boulders the size of automobiles. It would be a fatal crash.
Looking good down a
He
half.
glides past that crater, it's at least 80 feet across, and spots a landing field about 100 feet square.
Lights on.
He must get into it. He's running low on
Down
fuel.
2.5.
His tank shows he has 1 minute left.
Forward. Forward. Good. 40 feet down, 2.5. Picking up some dust. 30 feet, 2.5 down. Straight shadow. 4 forward. 4 forward.
He has
Drift into
30
the right
seconds
level.
of fuel before they crash on the moon.
Down a half. 30 seconds. Forward. Just. Good. Okay. Contact light. Okay, engine stop. APA at a descent. Mode control both auto. Descent engine command override off. Engine arm off. 413 is in.
They came 250,000 miles and landed with less than 10 seconds of fuel left.
Houston, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
Hello. We have been asked what makes the new Bartles and James Premium Blush wine coolers so exciting. To answer this, Ed has come up with a sweetness scale. On the sweet end is Ed's Aunt Ruth. On the dry end is the Mojave Desert. As you can see, our new Premium Blush comes out a lot less sweet than Aunt Ruth. And while it is on the dry side, it is a lot more refreshing than the Mojave Desert. Please try new Premium Blush, and we thank you for your support.
Kids and breakfast. When I give them what I want them to have, I feel like a meanie. When I give in to what they want, I feel like a pushover. Thank goodness for Rice Krispies. It's got the wholesome rice and the vitamins and minerals they need, and it's got that snap, crackle, pop fun they want. With Rice Krispies, I feel perfect.
Good old Kellogg's Rice Krispies makes a mom feel perfect.
Patty Schoenfeld is deaf and has a speech impairment, but a unique IBM computer system lets her talk on the phone. To help people with disabilities, IBM established a national center that provides information about special computer equipment made by IBM and other companies. So people like Art Sweet, who are almost blind, can read a financial statement. People like Neil Gill, who can't easily sign their names, can write a memo. And people who have difficulty using their arms, like Madge Pentecost, can use a computer by aiming an infrared beam. This IBM Center serves as a source of information for these and other innovations, so more people with disabilities can use their abilities. For information, write IBM Box C1030, Atlanta, Georgia.
The moon above, the earth below will continue.
Hey, party animals, join actress Marcia Strassman from Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, classical punk pianist Richard Castle, and the Nylons on Pat Sajak tonight.
Is summertime television starting to bug you?
Inquiring minds want to know.
Maybe our SWAT team can help.
Would $50 and Jessica Hahn's phone number do it?
You've heard the buzz. This is no fly-by-night operation.
Well, that is just ridiculous.
So come inside, shut the door, and relax with Murphy Brown, Designing Women, Newhart, and Dr. Doctor.
Jeepers creepers, Cuppers, it is a wonderful life.
Let CBS get the bugs out of your summer. Take a comedy break, Monday.
This is CBS.
Over the past few years, a battalion of strangely equipped individuals has been roaming the American workplace, testing the air for substances that shouldn't be there, things that might make people sick, and insurance premiums skyrocket. Now, some find Aetna's approach a little unexpected.
Sorry, excuse me?
But when was the last time your insurance company did anything more surprising than mail you a bill?
The representative from the Soviet Union. The representative from Italy. The representative from Japan. The representative from West Germany.
Who else can get picked up in over 250 countries? AT&T International Long Distance.
Pilot's miraculous tale of survival.
At 11.
This is the last light falling on the United States. Those are the Nepali Cliffs on the island of Kauai, westernmost of the Hawaiian Islands. America ends here. There I am 20 years ago, thinner, filled with awe, certain that one of mankind's greatest feats had been accomplished that day. Neil Armstrong and Edwin Aldrin, right now, are standing on the moon. The rest of us will always remember where we were at this moment. I could look up at that moon and hear the voices of men walking on it. To bring back the excitement of that day, sometime, maybe now, go to your window and look at the moon. Think, men walked up there. Americans walked up there. That way, for an instant, you might catch the emotion that swamped humanity on July 20th, 1969.
We copy you down, Eagle.
Houston, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
Roger, Tranquility. We copy you on the ground. You got a bunch of guys about to turn blue. We're breathing again. Thanks a lot.
Wow.
Thank you.
And there they sit on the
You're
moon.
looking good here.
I thought never in human history have so many people shared the same moment, shared the same tongue, no matter what the language of astonishment might be.
私たちは待っているところで pour la première fois prennent pied sur la Lune. O godzinie 4:17 rano, czasu przylądka Kennedy, astronauta Neil Armstrong 等待着人类首次登陆月球的当天に到着しました。ケープケネディ時間で4時17分。
Während die Welt darauf wartet, dass ein Mensch zum ersten Mal den Mond.
Roger, Eagle, and you are safe for T1. Over. Eagle, you are safe for T1.
For hours, nobody knew exactly where on the moon their astronauts really were. It was an embarrassment to flight control that the astronauts were lost up there on the moon. When Neil Armstrong had steered Eagle beyond the planned landing site, he put down in an area some distance away from the one selected. At the same time, a Soviet spacecraft was attempting a landing on the moon. The Soviet moonshot was for propaganda. The aim of their unmanned vehicle was to scoop up some moon rocks and beat Apollo 11 back to Earth.
You're looking good here.
Okay, we're going to be busy for a minute.
After Armand, take care of the defense.
We're going to be busy here, Neil Armstrong just said. They were also overcome, those two men, and for a moment, they wanted no communication with Mission Control. What they did first was simple. They shook hands. Then, more personal things. Buzz Aldrin had some wine from a small silver chalice. He took communion.
Houston, this is Neil, radio check. Neil, this is Houston, loud and
Several
clear.
hours later,
Break,
the most dramatic moment of the mission. Neil Armstrong was about to step on the moon.
Okay, Houston, I'm on the porch. Roger, Neil.
Remind him as soon as he tethers the camera, contingency sample.
Okay, Neil, we can see you coming down the ladder now.
The billion people watching mostly ignored the science and engineering. They all knew what it was to put a foot to the ground.
At the foot of the ladder, the limb footbeds are only depressed in the surface about 1 or 2 inches, although the surface appears to be...
Now a step was to be taken on a heavenly body that had never been touched by any living thing from Earth.
I'm going to step off the limb now. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
That's a small step for a man. That's a giant leap for mankind. There had never before been a footprint on the moon.
Oh, that looks beautiful from here, Neil. It has a stark beauty all its own. It's like much of the high desert of the United States. It's different, but it's very pretty out here.
As a caution, at first only one astronaut was sent to the moon's surface. For a time, Buzz Aldrin stayed in the limb in case they had to leave in a hurry. He recorded the collection of the first rock samples.
Edge for you. Okay, ready for me to come out? Yeah, just stand by a second. I'll move this.
There were many fears. The original fear was that the surface of the moon would collapse under their weight and the weight of the limb. Still another, that man would succumb to the heat and cold of the moon. The dark of the moon is almost 250 degrees below freezing. The bright of the moon is 250 degrees above boiling. There was no atmosphere to shield them from the deep rays of the sun or from the micrometeorites that might go through their spacesuits like a bullet through butter.
Now I want to back up and partially close the hatch, making sure not to lock it on my way out.
Particularly good thought.
That's our home for the next couple hours. We want to take good care of it.
The greatest fear was that somehow there was something deadly or viral that would not only sicken the astronauts, but would poison the whole Earth if they returned with a bit of the moon.
Landing gear pad.
Nothing like this happened.
It's a very simple matter to hop down from one step to the next.
Yes, I found it to be very comfortable, and walking is also very comfortable. It's a good step. Yep. About a 3-footer.
Buzz Aldrin has just landed on the moon.
Beautiful view.
Isn't that something? Magnificent sight out here.
Magnificent desolation.
It was a Colt's canter. It was a cosmic jig.
Right up to the rock here.
This is Houston. You have approximately 3 minutes until you must commence your EVA termination activities. Over.
They were called back to the limb, back to that part of the mission that had no alternative system. It either worked or it didn't work.
Neil, this is Houston. We'd like you all to get 2 core tubes and the solar wind experiment. 2 core tubes and the solar wind. Over.
No one had ever gotten to the moon, much less ascended from it.
Roger.
Anything more before I head on up, Bruce?
Negative. Head on up the ladder, Buzz.
Adios, amigos.
The whole thing was so strange that in some skeptical human hearts there later grew the suspicion that these ghostly black and white images were an American CIA trick, that this all came from a backlot in Hollywood, and there really was nobody on the moon.
How you doing, Buzz?
I'm okay.
Nobody knew it for some time, but the Russian space mission crashed just a few miles away from them. It probably crashed because it was unmanned. It could not do the last-minute evasive maneuvers Armstrong had done. It was reported that the Soviet vehicle hit the moon at some 300 miles an hour and exploded. The Russian astronauts always expected it would. Months before, they had sent 2 small medallions to the American astronauts commemorating the 2 Soviet flyers who had died in their space program. Our men left the Russian badges on the moon along with a small piece of wood from the Wright brothers' first airplane. We also left medallions for the Americans who had died in our space efforts.
Neil, this is Houston. Did you get the Hasselblad magazine?
This is Houston. Did you get the Hasselblad magazine? Yes, I did. And we got about, I'd say, 20 pounds of carefully selected, if not documented, samples.
Houston, Roger. Well done. Out.
The second box.
Unofficial time off the surface at 1:11:37:32.
When President Kennedy had ordered this mission 9 years earlier, he had said we'd get a man to the moon and bring him home safely. Now that pledge of safety was to have its greatest test.
What are you pouring for us here, David? Is this something special?
Well, I found a new wine I think you might like.
What is this?
This has a beautiful color.
This is really good. Is it hard to find? I think I can get you a bottle.
Let me see what this is, David. Oh.
White Grenache. Gallo.
It's Gallo.
How about that?
Ernest and Julio Gallo introduce a remarkable new wine, White Grenache. It will change the way you think about Gallo.
It's a question of taste. If you had your pick of 2 cereals, both high-vitamin cereals, would you pick the one with just one kind of flake? Or Kellogg's Just Right with 3 different kinds of flakes, plus hearty rolled oats, plump raisins, sweet juicy dates, and crisp crunchy nuts? You're not alone. 2 out of 3 people pick Just Right over the leading high-vitamin cereal. In a world of high nutrition, Just Right is an answer to the question of taste. Kellogg's Just Right with fruit and nuts or crunchy fiber nuggets.
A tiger has black stripes. A tiger has a brown nose. We saw a rhinoceros.
Kindergartners across the country are reading as much as 2 grade levels above the national average because of an IBM learning program called Writing to Read. Using personal computers and other tools, it helps them convert sounds they can say,
see the word pig,
into sounds they can write and read.
A frog eats insects. A frog eats bugs.
I've been involved in a lot of innovative programs. This is the first one that I feel will stay forever. I think Writing to Read is here to stay.
I see a tiger. A tiger sees me. Tigers live in the sea. The end.
To learn more about Writing to Read, write IBM, Box 446, Montvale, New Jersey.
Newport, Rhode Island, the day man landed on the moon. Later in the day, the Newport Jazz Festival would take place here. Sleeping anywhere the city officials would permit were the young. To be young in the 60s was different. An unpopular war was going on. American political life was turbulent. The old owned everything and controlled everything. To be young in the 60s was to have your own fashions and your own ideals, and especially your own music. A major issue in 1969 was power. The energy derived from coal or oil or atoms was soiling, corrupting the physical world. Our need for electricity was tearing mountains apart, killing our rivers, dirtying our air. The whole country was beginning to understand that power not only corrupts, power pollutes. The fact was, though, that America lived by its complicated, interwoven technology, and we weren't going to give it up. Until we found the answer to pollution, we would continue to move to our beautiful and sometimes dangerous rhythms.
I think they have a mind to add. I'll put an end to all their courtship. I'll send him silent to his grave. They asked him to go hunting without any fear or strife. Under these two bold and wicked villains, they took away this young man's life.
Whose time was it? Who did July 20th, 1969 really belong to? At the Newport Jazz Festival, when the Master of Ceremonies tried to announce Americans had landed on the moon, the young ones knew, but they didn't want to hear.
You might be interested to know that can't make it. Hey, they just landed on the moon, you know. They're all there. Did you know that? We made the moon. Goodbye. Goodbye.
Tranquility Base, Houston.
Roger, go ahead.
Roger, our guidance recommendation is pings, and you're cleared for takeoff.
2 men were on the moon. 1 man was circling it. The time had come for the 2 men to lift off the moon and join the man in the rescue ship. What if they couldn't fire the ascent engine? There was no rescue plan if they couldn't get the limb off the surface. The closest human was Mike Collins. He could circle them, but that was all he could do. Collins later wrote that he had decided not to die circling. He'd stay there as long as he could, but then he'd come home alone and live with his guilt for the rest of his life.
Eagle, Houston, you're looking good to us.
9, 8, 7, 6, 5. Port stage, engine arm ascent, proceed. Channel, beautiful. 26, 36 feet per second up.
Safety was 7 long minutes away.
Very smooth. Very quiet ride. There's that one crater on there.
The engine had to burn evenly all the way.
1,000 feet high, 80 feet per second vertical rise. Eagle, Houston, request manual start override.
Roger.
They'd be in danger until they reached 50,000 feet where Collins could rescue them. So far, flawless.
Eagle, Houston, 1 minute, you're looking good.
From Collins' window, here they come. It's the limb. What they were supposed to do is throw a switch giving control of the operation to Mike Collins in Columbia. They forgot to do it. From the limb window, they see the command module moving into position. Collins inside doesn't know there's a problem. The limb draws closer and drifts to meet the probe. Mike Collins begins the final maneuvers for docking. The link-up is critical. If it doesn't work, the limb crew won't be able to enter the command module for the voyage home. If the error isn't corrected, the danger is that the limb could tear free. The astronauts are in for a rough docking. Contact. At first, Collins barely felt the pump. Then a violent movement. Mike reported, all hell broke loose. The docking is out of his control. After the switch is finally thrown, it holds fast. They're safe. The 2 men who had landed on the moon joined the man who had circled it. The lunar lander had served its purpose. It was abandoned. It would circle the moon until slowly the moon's gravity would capture it. Then it would crash in some unrecorded spot. Since the moon has neither atmosphere nor life, the carcass of the limb will not rot. It will remain on the moon forever. Mike Collins fires his rocket again to get them out of lunar orbit and to begin a long 3-day journey back to Earth.
On the Earth below, a man works with clay. He throws the earth to get the air bubbles out of it. Ron Burke, potter. The ancients studied the heavens at night and handled the good clay and the wheel during the day. The ancient Egyptians, Assyrians, Greeks all had their potter's wheels. This is one of the oldest technologies known to man. Its elements are the basic ones: earth and water and fire. It's all in the good hands and the good earth. Out of a pile of real dirt touched by real fingers comes truth. Truth shaped by human pressures into beauty.
11 Houston, could you describe what you're looking at, over?
Roger, you're seeing Earth as we see it at our left-hand window. It's a little more than a half Earth. We're looking at the eastern Pacific Ocean.
On July 20th, 1969, we were first in space. But this goes back to ancient Greece, back to Caesar's Rome, out to China, out to India, all distance and time. Back to before history was written, the potter's tradition. And when the bowl is finished, Ron Burke looks at it and does to it what no machine can do to its work.
In the north half of the top half of the screen, we can see North America.
The lights were turned on to welcome the three men home.
Canada, Mexico,
Seattle,
and Central America.
Portland, Vancouver, San Francisco. The cities the astronauts would see on their way back from the moon were lit for the night hours. Splashdown would be on the 8th day of the mission.
Apollo 11, this is Houston. I've got the morning news here if you're interested, over.
Yeah, we sure are. We're ready to copy and comment. Okay, first off, looks like it's going to be impossible to get away from the fact that you guys are dominating all the news back here in Earth. Even Pravda in Russia is headlining the mission and calls Neil the czar of the ship.
And in Corby, England, an Irishman, John Coyle, has won the world porridge eating championship by consuming 23 bowls of instant oatmeal.
I'd like to enter Aldrin in the oatmeal eating contest next time. He's on his 19th bowl.
Roger.
Back here in Houston,
Mike Collins later said, "I'm just like you, except that I have seen the Earth from a far distance and the moon up close."
Roger, this trip of ours to the moon may have looked to you simple or easy. I'd like to assure you that that has not been the case. This operation is somewhat like the periscope of a submarine. All you see is the three of us, but beneath the surface are thousands and thousands of others. And to all those, I would like to say thank you very much.
Neil Armstrong was the man the world would remember best because he had been the first to step on the moon. He was quiet and private then, and he would remain that way for the next 20 years.
We'd like to give a special thanks to all those Americans who did the construction, the design, the test, and put their heart and all their abilities into those crafts. To those people, tonight we give a special thank you.
The world would learn that in addition to his engineering and scientific skills, Edwin Aldrin was religious and strongly emotional.
We feel that this stands as a symbol of the insatiable curiosity of all mankind to explore the unknown. Personally, in reflecting the events of the past several days, a verse from the Psalms comes to mind to me. When I consider the heavens, the work of thy fingers, the moon and the stars which thou hast ordained, what is man that thou art mindful of him?
Apollo 11, signing off.
Only one long-distance company offers so many ways to save 24 hours a day. No matter when you call, only one company, AT&T. Our Reach Out America plan lets you save 24 hours a day with all the service and quality of AT&T. No one even comes close. No one. Call 1-800-REACH-OUT now.
This tugboat crew has a plan, and they begin by digging into those 2 scoops in every Kellogg's pack. 2 scoops will keep them coming back to those 2 scoops of plump juicy raisins in Kellogg's Raisin Bran. Hooked up and in command, they're working now, but they're thinking how they love 2 scoops and lots of wholesome bran. 2 scoops, they're turning back again for 2 scoops of plump juicy raisins in Kellogg's Raisin Bran. 2 scoops.
You want to start small, but think tall. That's your plan with computers that can grow along with you. How are you going to do it? Well, you're going to PS to it with the IBM PS2. You want to network up and network down. Share information with other towns. A well-organized team. Well, that's your dream. How are you going to do it? How? You're going to PS to it with the IBM PS2. You want to juggle 10 things all at once and still have time to break for lunch. Oh, in your business, you got a bottom line mission. You got to rise above all the competition. How are you going to do it? Easy. You're going to PS to it. The solution is IBM. The solution is IBM.
The moon above, the earth below will continue. While you and 30 million others wait for a new season of 60 Minutes, sit back, cool off, and watch the best of 60 Minutes all summer. This is CBS.
Want to meet the right girl?
Yeah, tasteful girl with quality written all over her.
Want to connect the dots? Meet the right girl, St. Pauli girl, the full-bodied German beer with quality and great taste.
You're the girl for me.
Channel 2 News Watch with Ernie Anastas and Michelle Marsh, sponsored by Aetna Insurance. Good evening. Coming up at 11, a plane flying on autopilot for hours crashes into the sea. The unconscious pilot comes to and survives. Also, police think they have the man who shot 2 New York State troopers.
Also, a 6-year-old Newark girl critically injured, and witnesses blame police for causing the hit-and-run accident. Plus, recalling man's first steps on the moon. Join us tonight at 11.
A while back, John Barricato went car shopping.
Take a couple of these, 3
He
of those.
bought 10.
Any particular color, sir? Nah.
Then he did something really unusual.
Ready? Ready!
You see, John leads the arson team at Aetna, the company leading the fight against one of America's most expensive crimes. And if we can learn something, we don't mind burning a little cash today.
This is what you look for.
To save customers a bundle down the road.
We're gonna need more cars.
Attack of the Killer Tennis Shoe, tomorrow at 4:30.
There's only one city in America that keeps all its lights on all the time. Las Vegas pulsed brash against the desert night. We went there just to see how the high-risk people felt about the dangers to the crew of Apollo 11. After the liftoff from the moon, the casinos turned off their television sets, the gamblers stopped watching, and the town went back to its own odds. On the day man landed on the moon, death was defied. A double somersault and a half twist. Nobody even looked up.
Columbia leaves lunar orbit and for 3 days falls back to Earth. As it approaches the re-entry speed of nearly 25,000 miles per hour, the last component of the rocket, no longer needed, was jettisoned to burn up in the Earth's atmosphere. The capsule positions itself for re-entry, protected by the heat shield. That's all that's left of the original rocket, from 6 million pounds to a capsule of less than 12,000 pounds, including the 3 men. They had traveled so far and risked so much. They left in fire, they'd come home in fire. Their voices still were even, flat.
No matter where you travel, it's always nice to get home.
We concur, 11. We'd be happy to have you back.
There it is, home. They fell towards it for 3 days, faster and faster. If they didn't enter at just the right angle, they'd either burn to death or skip back into space and freeze to death.
And 11 Houston, you're going over the hill there shortly. You're looking mighty fine to us. See you later.
Soon, part of the capsule will burn off. The cabin camera will show what 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit looks like.
Blackout very shortly. There's blackout.
No, you can still see it. You can see the red ball. It's awfully tough because it's awfully cloudy.
Apollo 11 should be on main chutes now.
Strokes.
Apollo 11 Houston, your diski reading please, over.
Below the clouds, an aircraft carrier waited to retrieve the astronauts. The USS Kennedy should have picked them up, but Richard Nixon had asked that the Hornet be sent in its place.
Apollo 11 Houston, through Orion, standing by, over.
The weather was so foul that the men at the Hornet's rail couldn't see the capsule hit the water. Radar found them, 9 miles out.
Apollo 11, this is Hornet, over.
Hello, this is Apollo 11, reading you loud and clear. Our position 1330.
11 Hornet, copy, 1330-1675. Any further data, over?
That's all that's left of the mighty rocket. To prevent the capsule from sinking, the astronauts inflated those balloon-like airbags. Inside, the crew was fighting seasickness. The priorities were the safety of the men and the recovery of the moon rocks. Now came the moment of biological fear. They may have brought home germs from the moon that would cause a plague on Earth, so they'd be quarantined for 3 weeks. It was a strange welcome for 3 heroes. They were safe. It was all over but the fanfare. The goal had been set by President Kennedy 9 years earlier.
I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal before this decade is out of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the Earth.
President Nixon paid a brief visit. He invited the astronauts to dinner at the White House. Now the astronauts belong to the world.
the day men first landed on the moon, we watched the long sunset on the country they had come from. From the East Coast, the tidewater country of Virginia, the small towns of the Midwest and South, the Great Plains, west of Hawaii, where it was almost tomorrow. The music you're hearing is part of the New World Symphony by Antonin Dvorak, a Czech who spent a pleasant July in Spillville, Iowa, 75 years earlier. The astronauts carried this tape all the way to the moon and back. In the cargo manifest of Apollo 11, it was listed as part of the personal support system. It's been 20 years now since that day, and we note this. Our days and our years are measured by the sun and its warmth. For most of us, the moon's a wanderer, slipping in and out of our nights, as elusive as memory. We live with it, but not by it. That's why we put these old scenes together, to drift back to a great day when the moon was at the center of our thoughts, and to remember three fine men who once went there and came back.
High self-esteem. I just feel so good about me.
It's more exciting now.
My goal is to learn to read.
My daughter caught on that I couldn't read, and then once she brought it to my attention, I was willing to do anything to try to get my education.
Here in Columbus, Ohio, and in classrooms across the country, an innovative IBM system called PALS is teaching adults to read.
You touch the screen, and the computer talks to you.
This is a snake.
Then you write it. Then you type it. Then something wonderful happens. You are reading.
I feel if I get my reading ability and get me a better job, that's my goal, just to try to go farther.
I can go into a restaurant and I can order just what I want because I can read now, and that makes me happy.
I don't think there is a word for the way I feel about it.
She's a new mom.
This portion of The Moon Above, the Earth Below has been sponsored by IBM. Whatever your size, whatever your needs, IBM is working to bring you the best solutions. And by Kellogg's Raisin Bran, with 2 scoops of plump, juicy raisins in golden flakes of bran.
All 3 men left the space program after the flight of Apollo 11. Once on the moon was enough. The training had been too rigorous, the crush of publicity too demanding. They wanted to get back to their private lives and private troubles. Over the years, CBS News taped their press conferences. The day of jubilation, 10 years later, 20 years later. You'll see time pass in their faces. Buzz Aldrin had the most trouble. 10 years after the landing, talking about himself in the third person.
Aldrin found that wearing and shedding the skin of heroism is no easy task. In seeking a new road, he fell into a state of depression and eventually underwent treatment at an Air Force hospital in Texas. Disguised in the depression was the creeping disease of alcoholism, which surfaced 3.5 years later and was a struggle he describes as the most overriding event in his life. The space program was kindergarten in comparison to coping with the culminating effects of alcoholism. You get into a pattern of just gradually spiraling down.
He overcame his marital and drinking problems and has since returned to public life as an author and space scientist.
I think it'd be a great understatement to say that it was the most significant event that happened in my life. Certainly, it changed my image of myself because of the image that was changed throughout the world of me, and then the ability to perhaps try and live up to that, to your standards and to my standards, was a most significant challenge. We're expected to be firm advocates for the business that we were in for a good bit of our life, and I think we certainly are. We advocate expansion of space activities as much as possible.
Countdown is concerned, the prime crew now departing from their crew quarters here at the Kennedy Space Center.
Neil Armstrong, the most private and the most commanding of the three. He was offered millions for commercial endorsements. He was offered the opportunity to run for office. He refused it all. He became a professor and has now retired to a farm.
I was delighted to be on the flight. It was worth a great deal to me personally. I was very privileged to be a part of that, irrespective of the consequences.
2.5, picking up some dust.
The consequences, of course, were in part exposure to the public eye, something Armstrong obviously dislikes. The high point of his life were these last 30 seconds over the moon.
30 seconds forward.
The touchdown itself, from my point of view, was a real high in terms of elation. Not so much for the instant, but because it marked the achievement that 1/3 people had been working for a decade to accomplish. And it was a feeling of we, 1/3 people, managed it.
The man who spoke most easily for Apollo 11 was Mike Collins, who circled the moon but never landed on it. He was a Major General in the Air Force, an Assistant Secretary of State, and the Director of the National Air and Space Museum.
No, the only thing I would say is I think there is a little tinge of sadness to the fact that at age 38 I had what will probably be the most fascinating job I'll ever have in my life. But, you know, that's tough. That's just the way it was and is, and that doesn't bother me.
He was asked the inevitable question about space. Why fly to the moon while our social problems on Earth are such a mess?
If we had pursued the logic that says you have to take money from the space program and put it into restoring the cities, we would never have ventured beyond Jamestown or Plymouth. We never would have gotten west beyond the Appalachian Mountains had we decided to render those little colonies perfect before we continued our exploration. And I think that the same thing is true today.
This is Houston. You are go for staging.
We're a nation of explorers. I mean, we started on the East Coast, we went to the West Coast, and then vertically. I mean, people have always gone where they've been able to go. It's in our tradition, it's in our culture. It's a fundamental thing to want to go, to touch, to see, to smell, to learn. And that, I think, will continue in the future.
It takes nothing away from these three fine men to say their voyage to the moon was as much an end as it was a beginning. Except for the shuttle disaster, America's interest in space has waned steadily since the first landing on the moon. 10 other men walked there, but they are footnotes to history. For the last 17 years, no human has been out of Earth's orbit. Our shuttles are always within the shores of Earth's gravity, much as the ancient seafarers stayed within sight and safety of land. The fact is, the Earth below keeps us from the sky above. Yet, like Columbus, Magellan, the Vikings, all great adventurers went into the unknown generations before practical settlers arrived. There's always a pause between discovery and use. In the late 60s, because of the Soviet challenge in space, we took a higher risk and had a great adventure. Today, there's less challenge and less risk. That other America, that other country of 20 years ago, they did things differently there. Dan Rather for CBS News. Good night.
For a transcript of this broadcast, please send $5 to CBS News Transcripts, 267 Broadway, New York, New York, 10007.
To learn more about America's pioneering efforts in space, the Library of Congress suggests these books. Footprints, the 12 men who walked on the moon reflect on their flights, their lives, and the future, by Douglas MacKinnon and Joseph Baldanza, and Liftoff by Michael Collins. These and many other interesting books are in your local library and bookstore. Visit them. They'll be happy to help you read more about it.
Temperatures between 75 and 80 degrees.
Love these cooler temperatures, too.
Nice.
Yeah.
Bringing out the good stuff. Thanks, Chief. Well, you may look up in the sky and remember a remarkable event 20 years ago. Those of you who saw tonight's CBS News special, The Moon Above, the Earth Below, might recall that moment when the first men set foot on the moon. Well, Channel 2's Lisa Rudolph looks back at that historic triumph.
July 16, 1969, 3 astronauts take off on perhaps the greatest adventure ever. 4 days later, at 10:56 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, what was once fantasy becomes history. Neil Armstrong takes the first steps on the moon.
That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Well, I was 4 years old. I remember my mom getting me up for the rockets, and I can still remember the way the room looked.
I just could not believe that America and our scientists, our astronauts were really going to pull this off.
Very, very fine-grained as you get close to it. It's almost like a powder.
Boy, look at those pictures. Wow.
I was watching TV like everybody else. It was awesome. It was like being on acid without acid.
When they planted the flag on the moon and they did the moonwalk, I was interviewing Kate Smith on my radio show. We were playing her record called When the Moon Comes Over the Mountain.
Our Frank Field was with Huntley and Brinkley that night, broadcasting live.
It was probably one of the most exciting events ever, and we knew that everybody was watching. The entire country was up at midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning. Nobody was sleeping.
It wasn't just Americans tuning in. 600 million people, 1/5 the world's population, watched the moonwalk live on TV. On Saturday, the 3 Apollo 11 astronauts, Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Mike Collins, will kick off a special week commemorating their landing on the moon 20 years ago. And here on Channel 2 throughout next week, we will be looking back at the historic mission and how far our space program has come since then.
It was a special time and a special celebration, too.
A lot of memories.
Yep.
Thanks,
Thank you, Lisa.
That's it for us. I'm Michelle Marsh.
And I'm Ernie Anastas. For all of us here tonight, Mr. G, Warner Wolf, Michelle, and Lisa,
Everybody.
our good friend.